The weight of memory, Elena woke to the sound of hammers. She hadn't meant to sleep. The chair beside Cassian's frozen form wasn't designed for comfort, and her back protested as she straightened, one hand instinctively reaching for the monitoring equipment even before her eyes fully opened. The crystalline resonance detector showed stable readings, the same geometric patterns pulsing in slow, steady rhythm. Core temperature holding at 68 degrees. Breathing cycle. 57 seconds per breath. Unchanged. Always unchanged. The hammering grew louder, accompanied by voices calling instructions. Through the grand hall's partially destroyed roof, morning light slanted across marble floors still stained with scorch marks, and the lingering smell of void flame. Elena rubbed her eyes and checked her pocket watch. Just past 7. She'd managed perhaps 4 hours of sleep, collapsing into the chair sometime after 3 when her voice had finally given out from reading. Her notebook lay open on her lap, the page marked where she'd stopped. Day 2. He remembers who you are. He remembers why he chose this. Don't let yourself forget that he's still in there, still conscious, still. The entry ended mid-sentence, her handwriting dissolving into an ink smudge where her hand had slipped. Keeper Brightwater? Elena looked up to find a young woman in Mason's work clothes, standing at a respectful distance, holding a wooden tray. Steam rose from a covered bowl. Mira, Elena said, recognizing her from yesterday. You don't need to call me that. Elena is fine. Keeper's the proper address, ma'am. Mira approached carefully, as if afraid of disturbing something sacred. Her eyes kept darting to Cassian's form, then away, uncomfortable. Brought you breakfast. Archmage Verena said you didn't eat last night. Elena accepted the tray, porridge with honey, bread, tea, and realized she couldn't remember her last meal. The smell should have made her hungry, but her stomach remained stubbornly uninterested. Thank you, she said, setting it on the small table that now stood beside her vigil chair. Someone had brought furniture while she slept, the table, a standing lamp, a second chair for visitors. How's the reconstruction coming? Mira glanced toward the workers visible through the far doorway. Master Architect says the structural damage isn't as bad as it looks. The foundation's sound. They're clearing debris today, starting repairs tomorrow. She hesitated. They're being careful around the convergence point. Archmage Verena gave strict instructions not to disturb anything within 20 feet. Elena looked at the scorched circle surrounding Cassian, the blackened marble radiating outward from where he stood. The pattern resembled a frozen explosion, as if reality itself had recoiled from what he'd done. Good, Elena said. That's good. Mira shifted her weight, clearly wanting to say something else. Elena waited. My brother, Mira said finally. He was in the southern market when the wardstone failed. The healers said if the warden hadn't done what he did, if the Void Weaver had gotten through. Her voice cracked. I just wanted to say thank you for staying with him, for making sure people remember. Elena's throat tightened. What's your brother's name? Tomas. He's 12. He wants to be a baker like our Da. Elena pulled out her notebook, found a blank page. Tell me about him. Mara blinked. Ma'am? Tell me about Tomas, what he's like, what he dreams about. The kingdom needs to remember why Cassian did this, not just that he saved everyone, but who he saved, the specific people with specific dreams. Mira's eyes glistened. She sat in the visitor's chair and began to talk. Elena wrote it all down. By mid-morning, the grand hall had transformed into organized chaos. Workers moved through the space with practiced efficiency, sorting debris, cataloging damage, marking structural concerns. Master Architect Davrin, a gruff man in his 60s with calloused hands and sharp eyes, had established a command post near the main entrance, directing teams with the precision of a military campaign. Elena watched from her vigil, grateful they were keeping their distance from the convergence point. The workers gave Cassian's frozen form nervous glances, but maintained the 20-foot perimeter Verena had mandated. Good. She didn't want anyone disturbing him. Didn't want casual hands touching the corruption patterns that might still hold some fragment of his consciousness. She'd managed half the porridge before her stomach rebelled. The tea helped at least. Something warm to hold. Something to do with her hands when they started shaking. Keeper Brightwater. Elena turned to find Magister Kellen approaching. his gait still slightly uneven from the shadow spawn corruption that had nearly killed him. The mark where Cassian's void flame had stopped the spread remained visible on his neck, a thin line of geometric scarring that would never fully fade. "Magister," Elena said, standing. "How are you feeling?" "Better than I have any right to be." Kellen stopped at the perimeter's edge, studying Cassian with an expression Elena couldn't quite read. "I came to pay my respects and to apologize." Elena frowned. "For what?" "I was there," Kellen said quietly. "In the grand hall when the conventional reinforcement collapsed. I saw what was happening, saw the Void Weaver breaking through, and I was too terrified to move. I watched him walk to the convergence point alone." He met her eyes. "I should have stood with him. Should have done something besides cower behind a pillar while he burned himself to ash, saving us all." "You were wounded," Elena said. "You'd nearly died." So was Archmage Verena. So were half the Magisters who held the line when the Shadow Spawn came. Being wounded isn't an excuse for cowardice. Kellen's jaw tightened. "I've been thinking about it constantly, about how many of us stood by and let one young mage carry the entire burden because we were too afraid to touch forbidden magic ourselves." Elena recognized the guilt in his voice, the same guilt she heard in King Aldrich's words, in Mordane's careful restraint. Everyone who survived was carrying it. "He didn't do it alone," Elena said. "He channeled the 73 souls. They held the line together. But he was the one willing to become the conduit, the one willing to let corruption consume him." Kellen looked at Cassian's blackened eyes, his corrupted skin. "The one willing to pay the price none of us would." They stood in silence for a moment, the sound of reconstruction work filling the space between them. "I'm requesting a transfer," Kellen said, "to the border ward stations. Somewhere I can actually be useful if this happens again in 3 centuries. Somewhere I can make sure my cowardice doesn't doom whoever has to stand where the warden stood." Elena thought about that, about how Cassian's sacrifice would ripple outward, changing people, changing how they thought about duty and cost. "I think he'd approve of that." Kellen nodded. He reached into his robes and pulled out a small package wrapped in cloth. "I brought this, for your vigil." He set it carefully on the table beside her chair. "It's just tea. Nothing special, but my grandmother used to say tea was how you turned waiting into ritual, made patience into practice. Seemed appropriate." "Thank you," Elena said, genuinely touched. Kellen gave a slight bow and turned to leave. Elena watched him go, then unwrapped the package, 3 varieties of tea leaves, carefully labeled, with brewing instructions in neat handwriting. A small kindness. A way of saying, "You're not alone in this." She made a note in her journal. Magister Kellen visited, brought tea, requested border transfer. The sacrifice changes people. Archmage Verena arrived just before noon, accompanied by a younger mage Elena didn't recognize, a woman in her 30s with auburn hair and the silver insignia of a senior researcher. "Elena," Verena said, her tone warm despite the exhaustion evident in her face. The bandages around her ribs had been changed, but she still moved carefully. "How are you holding up?" "I'm fine," Elena said automatically, then reconsidered. "I'm managing." Verena's expression suggested she saw through the deflection, but chose not to press. "This is senior researcher Amara Whitestone. She specializes in essence preservation and magical stasis. I asked her to examine the ceiling and provide a professional assessment." Amara approached the convergence point with the careful respect of someone who understood exactly what she was looking at. She carried a leather case full of monitoring equipment, more sophisticated than Elena's basic meters. "Keep her Brightwater," Amara said, nodding respectfully. "May I?" Elena gestured permission. Amara set up her equipment at the perimeter's edge, taking readings with practiced efficiency. Elena watched, anxiety building with each measurement. Finally, Amara stepped back, studying her notes with a slight frown. "Well?" Verena asked. "The stasis is stable," Amara said. "Remarkably so, given the circumstances. The corruption has crystallized in place rather than continuing to spread. It's acting as both prison and preservation simultaneously. His vital signs are consistent with deep magical hibernation, though the core temperature is lower than I've ever seen in a living subject." She looked at Elena. "You've been monitoring the resonance patterns?" Elena nodded. "Every hour. They haven't changed." "Good. Keep doing that." Amara consulted her notes again. The consciousness merger is unprecedented. I can detect 74 distinct essence signatures, but they're harmonized rather than conflicting. It's as if they've become a single entity while somehow remaining individual. Can they be separated? Elena asked, unable to stop herself. Amara's expression turned sympathetic. Not without breaking the ceiling. They're not trapped together, they are the prison. Separation would mean release, and release would mean the Void Weaver goes free. Elena had known that, but hearing it confirmed still felt like a blow. 3 centuries, 300 years of this frozen existence. However, Amara continued, the preservation is remarkably complete. Brain activity, essence integrity, memory structures, all intact. When the 3 centuries end, when the ceiling is meant to release, there's no physiological reason he couldn't return to full consciousness. Elena's heart lurched. He could wake up? After 300 years, he could just wake up? In theory, Amara's tone was cautious. But that assumes the ceiling functions as intended, that the release mechanism works, that 3 centuries of imprisonment doesn't damage the consciousness in ways we can't predict. The founding mages never woke. They died in the original ceiling. We have no precedent for what happens when a living conduit is preserved this long. But it's possible, Elena insisted. He could survive this. Amara met her eyes. It's possible. But Keeper, you need to understand, even if he wakes, he won't be the same person. 3 centuries of merged consciousness, of being the prison, of holding back the Void Weaver, that changes you in ways we can't imagine. The man who wakes in 300 years might remember being Cassian Netherbane, but he'll also remember being 73 other people. He'll have lived 3 centuries as a collective entity. The individual identity you're trying to preserve, it might not survive intact. Elena thought about Cale Thornweave, who forgot his own sister's name in 3 days. She thought about the 74's brief communication yesterday. We're already forgetting the taste of wine, the smell of rain. Then I'll remind him, Elena said firmly. Every day for 300 years, if that's what it takes. I'll read him his memories until he can't possibly forget who he is. Amara looked like she wanted to argue, but Verena touched her arm gently. Thank you for the assessment, Amara, Verena said. Your report will be invaluable for the historical record. Amara nodded, gathering her equipment. She paused before leaving, looking at Elena with something like admiration. For what it's worth, Keeper, I think what you're doing matters, even if he can't hear you, even if the memories fade. Bearing witness matters. Someone should remember the cost. After she left, Verena settled carefully into the visitor's chair, wincing slightly. You should be resting, Elena said. So should you. Verena's tone was dry. But here we both are, pretending we're fine. Elena almost smiled. Did you come to lecture me about taking care of myself? Actually, I came to warn you. Verena's expression turned serious. Greymark isn't done. He lost the council vote yesterday, but he's been meeting with other magisters, building support for another attempt. Elena's stomach tightened. To move Cassian to the crypts, to properly honor him, as they're framing it now. They're arguing that the Grand Hall should be a place of celebration and ceremony, not a constant reminder of tragedy. They want to build a beautiful monument here, something inspiring and heroic, while moving the actual evidence somewhere less visible. They want to hide him, Elena said flatly. Bury the uncomfortable truth where people don't have to look at it. Yes, Verena met her eyes. And they're gaining traction. Several magisters who voted against the motion yesterday are reconsidering. The reconstruction is going to take months, and having him here, frozen and corrupted, makes people uncomfortable. They want to move on, Elena. They want to feel safe again without being reminded of what safety cost. Elena looked at Cassian's frozen form, the black eyes, the geometric corruption patterns, the visible evidence of what forbidden magic did to a person. She understood the discomfort. Looking at him hurt, but that was precisely why people needed to see. What do I do? She asked. Fight, Verena said simply. You won yesterday because you spoke truth they couldn't ignore. You'll need to do it again, and again, for as long as they keep trying to rewrite this story into something more comfortable. I'm just one person, Elena said. I'm not even a magister. I'm 22 years old, and the only reason I have any authority at all is because of who I loved. You're the keeper, Verena corrected. That position has historical weight, even if people forgot it existed. And you're the one who stood beside him through everything, the corruption, the preparation, the final working. You're the witness. That gives you power if you're willing to use it. Elena thought about Mira's brother Tomas, who wanted to be a baker. She thought about all the people sleeping safely tonight because Cassian had been willing to become this frozen, corrupted thing. She thought about 3 centuries from now when someone else might face the same choice, and whether they'd have the courage if the truth had been buried and sanitized. "I'll fight," Elena said. "However many times it takes." Verena smiled, tired but genuine. "Good, because they're calling another council session tomorrow afternoon. Greymark is formally proposing the relocation. You'll need to be there." Elena's exhaustion felt suddenly overwhelming. "Another battle. Already. I'll be there," she promised. Verena stood carefully, one hand pressed to her bandaged ribs. "Get some rest before then. Eat something." You can't be his voice if you collapse from exhaustion. After Verena left, Elena sat in silence, listening to the reconstruction work, to Cassian's impossibly slow breathing, to her own heartbeat that felt too fast, too fragile. She pulled out her notebook and began to write. Evening came with the workers departing, their tools packed away, their voices fading into the distance. The grand hall fell quiet except for the occasional creak of damaged stone and the whisper of wind through the broken roof. Elena lit the standing lamp, adjusted her monitoring equipment, and opened the notebook to day one's entries. She'd read these to him yesterday, but Amara's words echoed in her mind. The individual identity you're trying to preserve might not survive intact. Then she'd make sure it did. She'd remind him every single day who he was, what he loved, why he mattered. "Day 2, Elena began, her voice steady in the empty hall. "You've been in the ceiling for 48 hours now. The reconstruction crews started work this morning. They're being careful around you, respectful. Master Architect Davrin says the foundation is sound." She paused, watching the geometric patterns pulse slowly across his skin. "Magister Kellen came to see you. He's transferring to the border stations. Says he wants to make sure his cowardice doesn't doom whoever stands where you stood 3 centuries from now. Your sacrifice is changing people, Cassian, making them braver, making them think about what duty really means." The corruption patterns flickered, just slightly. Elena's breath caught. "I know you can hear me," she said softly. "I know you're still in there, and I'm going to keep reminding you who you are until you come back to me. I don't care if it takes 300 years. She began to read from the notebook, his memories, his loves, his reasons. Outside, Thornhaven settled into another peaceful night, citizens sleeping soundly behind wards that would never fail. And in the grand hall, Elena Brightwater maintained her vigil, her voice the only sound in the darkness. Tomorrow she would fight another battle. Tomorrow she would defend his placement again, would argue for uncomfortable truth over comfortable lies. But tonight, she would simply read and remember and refuse to let him be forgotten.
Thanks for watching our stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more epic adventures. Thanks for watching our stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more epic adventures.